Okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it looks fine. Gee, okay.
Okay, put it here.
Straight and everything.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that alright? So let's
Is
talk
it
again.
recording already?
Yeah, it's
It's
recording
recording
already.
already.
Yeah,
Okay, sure.
you can
Right,
always
okay.
edit it.
Alright, so last time when
But you
I
can't
came
see
to
the-
you guys,
Can't
I
see.
gave you a little bit of an overview of my chapter 2. Alright, so from that we learned together how AMH actually developed from, or why it's even relevant to talk about something like the adaptive markets hypothesis. Now what I didn't go on about last time was how I'm actually going to test this and why it's even relevant and how the method is attached to the theory. So I'm just going to divulge a little bit into what my methodology is today, so that you guys can understand what a genetic algorithm is and how it is, why it is probably the most applicable method to test the adaptive markets hypothesis. Because there are quite other few methods that have been used in the past, such as the Heineken-Patterson rolling window test, or just simply you could modify any type of test that tests technical analysis or fundamental analysis to see whether the portfolio or whatever the strategy has waxed and waned in the past. So it's not like there is no other way to test it, but I will try to explain why the genetic algorithm is the best way. But before we do that, I first got to, basically last time we looked at the basic theory and EMH and behavioral finance. Those, if you've forgotten, AMH is just trying to connect the two theories and uses evolutionary theory to do so. And the two implications of 5, but they can be neatly summarized into these two, is just cyclical efficiency, that refers to the market, and because if efficiency is cyclical, then naturally there should be the possibility that active strategies would wax and wane. That is to say that in certain periods they would be profitable, and in other times they wouldn't be. Alright? And this is one of the ways that I would define cyclical effectiveness, right? Which is basically the combination of both, which is to say that this is what I would expect to happen, the trading model would always have to be the number of trades, or the return of the trading model should be greater than that of the market. That should be if profitability is cyclical, all right. And the reason I'm at this stage when I was developing the methodology, I was comparing it with the markets. And most likely I will change to linearity versus non-linearity, so I'll probably use some kind of linear model and compare it to the GA. But for now, we'll just think of it in terms of the market. And of course, this is the return of the market, and that's the return of the trading model. And returns of the trading model should always be greater than 0, so that means that the strategy is never passive. Alright? There's always trading. And that, of course, that is why this T at time T over here represents the number of trades. It should always be greater than 0, because it's going to be a strategy that is constantly trading. Alright? So that's what I'm trying to do. But now, why do we even care about the genetic algorithm? Now, if you look at AMH says that we don't know what is optimal for us, right? What our optimal satisfaction is. Unlike expected utility theory would suggest that we have we have a budget constraints, we maximize the utility according to the budget constraints. That's what we taught in microeconomics. But Simon in 1965, he introduces the notion of satisficing, which says, well, you don't really know what the best optimal thing is for you, alright? So you could just say that you know what you know. So you develop a heuristic, and a heuristic is just things that you learn over time. I'll illustrate that in a moment. And everybody develops their heuristic in a different way, alright? So if we don't know what the particular max value of whatever we're trying to maximize is, or where we are satisfied, and we just say that, okay, look, if I'm trying to maximize what type of food I like, for example, and if I eat this kind of food and I'm happy with it, then that would be a way that I'd be like, okay, I'm just satisfied with this particular thing, alright? But, okay, let me rather go on to the next example and try and explain what bound rationality actually is, right? In a more less technical way, okay? So the first time I did a presentation, okay, I'll never forget it. I dressed like that, all right? I dressed like some hip hop skater going to a concert, and I was going to talk about securities and banking regulations and how the JSE actually developed, right, and how efficient it was. And while the presentation was a favourable response, we were told thereafter, please, never dress like that when you're doing a formal presentation again. Alright? So thereafter, I started dressing the next presentation, I decided to dress like this. And as you can see me now, I'm definitely not dressed like that. Now, why would I tell you something like this? Let me get to it. Before I came here, right, I needed to decide what I was going to wear. And I want you to imagine that I've got 5 jackets, 10 pants, 20 ties, 10 shirts, 10 pairs of socks, 4 pairs of shoes, and 5 belts, right? Let's say that's what's in my cupboard right now, at this particular point in time. If I decided that I am going to be a rational, the Homo economicus, that is the rational investor that is described as per EMH and modern portfolio theory and economics in general. If I was to decide that I'm going to wear the absolute best looking suit that I've got in my cupboard, right? I'd have 2 million possible outfits that I could possibly wear, alright? I mean, you can figure that out from just multiplying the combinatorics, right? My items of clothing that I've got. Right, so I've got 2 million. So now let's further assume that it takes me 1 second to evaluate each and every thing that I've got. Right, that's unrealistic. That's an unrealistic expectation. So you've got 1 second, but let's just go with it. If I've got 1 second, how long would it take for me to get dressed? Furthermore, if you do the calculations, I mean 1 second, 60 seconds in a minute, 1 second per 1 minute every second, that means there's 60 outfits every minute. Keep on multiplying that, it would turn out that I would take 23.1 days to find out what is the absolute best suit that I am supposed to wear. So now my question is, why don't I do this? If I'm supposed to be EMA says that everybody is rational. So if I'm a rational person and then I should think like this, isn't it so?
Expect utility maximizer basically. So for each of the 2 million possible outcomes, if you are rational, you are supposed to evaluate each of those 2 million outcomes. To
see whether or not which one is the best one. And I don't even know and I haven't even considered colours or anything. Let's assume that they're all the same colour, right? I mean, there could be one that is great for my arms, one that's great for my legs, brings out the colour of my skin. I don't know, right? But it would take 23.1 days to do that if I had done this. But we don't do this, right? Because we develop a heuristic as has been described over here. I was told, don't dress like this when you do a presentation, right? But previously this was okay. When I walked around campus, no one said, hey dude, don't dress like that. You know, no one told me anything. But then, when I did my presentation, I revised what I know. And now, I've learned that I do this. And this certainly didn't take me 23.1 days to dress. I mean, I would have only been doing this presentation next month if that was the case. Right? So, what I'm trying to get is that you learn something by trial and error, right? Your heuristics evolve with time. You don't always do the absolute best thing. And even at this present time, I don't even know if this is the best outfit that I could have worn. In that 2 million, there might be an absolute best one. But this is about as good as it gets, and this works for me, right? So now, how do I, now you think about this in a financial context, right? You, tick by tick, prices are moving. How are you supposed to know what portfolio is the absolute best portfolio at any point in time if you're evaluating stocks in the market? So, if you don't know, that is what AMH says, that you don't know what the absolute best possible market portfolio is, for example. Right? And that's why the markets are not efficient in the sense that it reaches a steady-state equilibrium. It doesn't work that way. AMH would say that it is a continuous cycle, as opposed to always approaching this steady-state equilibrium. So if you don't believe me, that you are limited by your cognitive ability, right? I mean, I could ask anyone, as smart as all of us are here, I could ask any of you guys right now, what happened on the GAX exchange at 12:45 a.m. in, I don't know, on the 25th of March 1967. None of us would know that, right? I mean, you could argue that if I had to know, I would have known, but you don't know. How can little information be better than more information? Alright? So your cognitive ability is limited because we're human. We can only remember so much, even the smartest guy. So if you don't believe me, I've got this little, I'll just going to, oops, excuse me. This is not supposed to open. So, what we got, I'm just going to take a short little detour. Why is everything so slow now? Why the heck?
It's the same as, like, for example, isn't that in terms of binomial model, do you guys remember from 305? That you're supposed to evaluate the possible outcome of the next price movements in option price and so on. But a lot of time we take into account a lot of outcomes that are not supposed to be taken into account for. For example, if you have a 100 steps binomial, okay, then what is the possibility for a share price to go up 100 times? Or for the share price to go down 100 times, eventually approach to zero? It's very highly unlikely, okay? So the important thing is to, I mean, nowadays people actually don't look at the actual outcome because they are unrealistic assumptions, and they actually allocate the probability into the range of possible outcomes only.
Alright. So okay, finally I got this going. So I've shown some of my colleagues, Ani Kimberly and Ashley and Manuel, 2 years ago, maybe they've forgotten this, but I've showed them this little experiment before, and it's not very long, it's only 2 minutes, and what I want you to do is, you're going to see some people passing a basketball, and I want you guys to focus on the ones that are passing the ones that are wearing white shirts, how many passes they make. Alright, so at the end of the minutes, I'm going to ask you how many passes they make, and I want you to count. At the same time, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to blurt out random numbers. Alright? So I just want you guys to focus and tell me how many passes there are. Alright? Very, very quickly. Let's see if we can do this together. Alright, 7, 9, 15, 4, 5, 6, 11, that definitely looks like 11 at the moment, 14, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, okay, so we're done. How many did you guys see? 12? 15? 15? Can we, so okay, so the correct number is 15, alright? So I want to know, well, how many of you guys saw the gorilla?
Yeah, I saw it.
How many of you guys saw the gorilla?
I did saw it.
Who saw the gorilla? You guys not see the gorilla?
You didn't focus on
Hey,
guys, during what was happening, okay, if you hadn't seen it, if you didn't see it, a gorilla didn't only come into the screen.
Oh, okay.
It came into the center, beat its chest, and then it left. Alright? So what was happening over here was you were focusing on me saying random numbers. You were focusing on the guys in white passing the balls. You guys were not focusing on the guys in black, nor were you focused on anything black in the picture, and the gorilla came in black. Right? So this is the first way I can show you, right? So if you can't see a gorilla, how on earth are you going to evaluate? How on earth can you be expected to be a rational investor and evaluate portfolios in the best possible way each and every time? If you can't see a portfolio, if you can't see a gorilla in the middle of some humans passing the ball. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to show you the exact same thing again. And I want you to count how many they're passing this time. Right? Very quickly. Similar thing. Right? 7, 5, 12, 19, 6, 8, 9, 25, 32, 26, 39, 50, 32. Okay, so so that's the number of passes this time. So I'd like to know, Did you guys see the gorilla this time?
Yes.
Right, you guys, everyone saw the gorilla. And is that all that happened in the thing? Can anyone else tell me if anything else happened? Kimberly?
The curtain colour change.
Okay, so the curtain colour change, did anyone see that? That the curtain colour change? Alright, so there's that, but there's something else as well. Can anyone notice that? Alright, so not only did the curtain colour change along the time that the gorilla appeared,
Yeah.
but also you'll realize that one of the members, that were playing the game, they were wearing black, they just decided, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm out of here. And they're leaving. So what I'm saying, so what does this show? That even in light of new information, you guys were still, with the exception of Kim, you guys still were not able to see everything, even though you knew what to expect. There was still something that you couldn't evaluate, even though I told you, you guys were metacognizant of what was going to happen. So, given this little experiment, alright, so I'm not saying it's a foolproof method of saying that, you know, AMH is correct, but I'm just trying to illustrate why bond or something like our rationality has to be revised in terms of how we expect it to be in terms of EMH and Homo economicus. Okay, so now, this is the genetic algorithm. These are the steps that are involved. And the genetic algorithm does exactly this. It does not find the absolute correct solution to a particular problem, right? But what it does do is it tries to find what is the closest possible solution to your particular answer. Now, when you're doing a simple type of question, like if you use this to solve a quadratic equation, you'll be wasting the time. Because it might do like maybe even 10 generations before it gets to the correct answer, right? But when you're dealing with a complex question in which the answer is not straightforward, then something like a genetic algorithm would be worth looking into. So these are the phases, alright? It starts at initializing a population. I'll go through it in everything in a moment. Then you evaluate it, but just forget about that for a second. That only becomes relevant around here. Then it goes to a selection process. Now, what happens at the selection phase is that all these in the population there's a whole lot of solutions, and these solutions are pit against each other. Well, a number of ways. There are a number of ways to carry out the selection phase. But in the tournament selection method, what happens is that two solutions are pit against each other, and we see which one is better than the other. If, let's say, the one has a return of 10% and the other solution, which tells us by these particular stocks and the return is 5% of the other, then the 10% one beats the 5%. Well, if the risks are the same, of course, right? And therefore, the solution that provides a 5% return, that one is kicked out and we forget about that one, right? The algorithm will do that and only try and keep the 10% one in because it starts maximizing our objective function, which may be returned in that case. Alright, I'm saying lots of things I haven't yet explained. Anyway, so after that, we get crossover and mutation. And I think that it's best that I continue with the presentation before I explain those. And the termination criteria, basically, after everything has completed over here, you actually decide whether or not you're happy with that particular outcome. So if you say that I want my Sharpe ratio to be twice that of the market, right? So you want it to be 2. Then if you carry out these steps and the algorithm actually does, as a matter of fact, generate something that's 2 or more, then you would say yes, that I'm happy with this particular solution, and that would be the solution that you select. So let me explain further, right? So this is the initial population, all right? It looks weird, doesn't it? Right? These things are solutions coded in binary, right? That is 1 and 0. So each and every little digit over here, in science terms I would say that this is the chromosome, right? Each and every one of them, right? They tell me a little bit of something about what I want to optimize. So for example, in this 1100 over here, right, if each and every digit represented with a fundamental variable, let's say book to market, right, if it evaluated book to market, and if a 1 means that the price is, the book to market ratio is greater than 1, in other words, the stocks are undervalued, right? That would mean that it would generate a signal of 1. Otherwise, it would generate a signal of 0, right? So it will do that. So based on that particular criterion, I will select whether or not I will buy or sell the stock. And you can do that for a whole string of variables. So each and every one in here could be cash flow to price, earnings to price, blah blah blah, all the way. So these are all solutions that can be coded in that way. Alright? That's what the initial population would look like. Then we get to the crossover phase. Now what happens here is, this is where the algorithm really starts to work. Alright? It starts mixing the solutions. This is why it's called an evolutionary method of computation, because it's trying to mimic what happens in evolution, right? So you learn animals. What happens is they learn from dying and living and how the environment works. That's why AMH says that the market is only efficient as its constituents, and people learn. So what's happening here is we're trying to mimic that by saying, okay, if I should buy according to earnings to price over there, maybe if I combine that with buying book to market, cash flow and earnings to price, maybe I'll get a better solution. Let's see what happens. So what happens is, this is called the 2-point crossover because it crosses over after the second digit. Alright? So what happens is, see this 10 and 0? This 10 and 0 goes to this 1101 over here to create 1110. And similarly, the 01 over here, it goes to the 1010 over there to become 1101. Alright? So you can see how they cross over. Alright? So this is all that happens in the crossover phase. And then the following stage would be mutation. Now, what happens here is any random digits, any one, right, is changed into a 1 or a 0, right? There's nothing to it. It just gets changed. Now, it's not with a high probability. So not each and every time there isn't a mutation. Okay, otherwise the algorithm wouldn't work like it should, right? It would become extremely random. What we want is this to happen on one of the problems with I might as well tell you right now. One of the problems with genetic algorithms are the rates of crossover and mutation. Finding out which the appropriate rate is, that could usually be a very big problem, right? Because if this mutation rate is too high, right, it kind of ruins the whole use of using a genetic algorithm, because it's just creating random numbers all the time. And if the crossover, but if this value is too low, naturally you won't really have, you'll have a lack of diversification in your solutions. Alright? Nevertheless, so what happened here is that any random digits, right? So 1101 over here was changed to, the 1 over there was changed to a 0, and similarly over here, oh, that one didn't mutate at all. Yeah, that's to show that mutation doesn't have to happen for each and every solution, just for certain ones. Okay, right. And if you have been satisfied with what you receive as defined by an objective function, which you said, like I said, was the Sharpe ratio, for example. If you're satisfied by your Sharpe ratio, then you can go ahead and stop the process. And you keep on doing that until you find a particular solution. So, as you can see, that the generic algorithm is in line with what AMH states. Alright? It uses an evolutionary method, and so does the generic algorithm. And as such, I believe that this method would probably be the best to use. And that's why I'm implementing it as I have just described to you guys right now. And I think with that, that's pretty much all that I've got to explain to you guys for today. Alright?
Yeah, I think the idea is very clear of your presentation, even continuing from what you presented about AMH the last time. But the important thing is the next step will be how to transfer this idea into the actual research methodology that you would like to carry out. Do you have like a starting point? What do you like to do?
Oh yeah, well what happens is, what would you like to know from the very beginning? Okay, what happens is I take the algorithm and I have all these variables that I've downloaded as we discussed the last time, right? So I've got all these variables. And what happens is you create like a pool of, you have all these pools of variables, and the generic algorithm will have to select during a particular training period. Let's say, I think I'm sure my data goes from 2000, from 98 all the way to 2013. And what happens here is that you reach a point where, let's say from 2000 to 2000, from 98 to 2005, we train the data, right? So we train the variables to see which ones are useful. We try
The
to see
attributes, basically.
the attributes, yes. We try and see which attributes are valuable, right? To
Predicting
explain
the return.
to explain returns, right? And the way we do, so we put that in. So we might have, if I select 10, then we might have a string, like I presented a second ago. We might have a string of 10 variables. If 4, then I might have 4. But initially, I probably test all to see which ones are the best ones.
So
Right?
basically, which ones will be help you to explain the return?
Yes, right.
Like for example, if you start with Feynman and Friends 3-factor model, I mean that is an intuitive model, really based on any algorithm. Intuitively, he thinks that they think that, for example, the market risk premium is from cap M should be kept, but their reasoning is that they don't think that size effect and value effect are market anomalies. They think that they are the missing risk factors to be incorporated into the model.
Yeah.
So they don't think that only the market risk matters. There is also something that determines, for example, if you're a smaller cap, I mean your distress cost is higher. In terms of if you value stocks, means you currency are also in some kind of trouble as well. So then by incorporating those risk factors into the model, then they say Feynman and Friends 3-factor model is able to explain the cross-section of whatever returns that is. So it's basically minimizing the alpha. Yeah, so that is the intuitive model.
Yeah.
So according to what you are doing, you basically just plug in anything.
Yeah. Just to see, because it's just to see which ones are valuable at the very beginning. I mean, there are various papers that actually that have done fundamental analysis and technical analysis on the South African market.
You mean the fundamental and the technical attributes?
Yes, attributes, yes.
For example, your momentum factor is actually a technical attribute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are quite a myriad of them that are actually we can find in the literature. But I feel that testing it as well would also just add some value, because this type of test is not being tested with respect to AMH in this particular way before. So might as well. I mean, for now, I don't know how it's going to work. I'll see if it doesn't work out. Then I'll have to change it. But that's how I'm proceeding at the moment. And yeah, as we put in the attributes and we see which ones are valuable or not, we will see if it explains returns, and we can create this kind of portfolio that beats the market or whatever type of linear asset pricing model, say Kaplan for example. If we can beat that, then we have found something useful. So now we're going to take it out of the trading period and see if it persists, right? So if those in-sample results were valid, and not as a result of data mining or something like that, and they work outside of the training period, then it kind of means that AMH is probably not as valid as I want it to be, because that would mean that probability doesn't wax and wane. Okay?
Yeah, it means that a set of factors are able to explain the returns. For example, Feynman and Friends 3-factor models, it works from period to period to period to period. So then what you will do is that you will reject the null hypothesis that the market you will reject the null hypothesis that the CAPM is as accurately specified, but then you will accept that in fact you need to have additional risk factors.
Yeah.
But the thing is that what if the factors change all the time? Then that means,
well, that would be in support of AMH then, because remember it says that probability strategy probability of strategies are cyclical, right? So which means that it shouldn't work. One strategy shouldn't work throughout the entire period, because then that would mean that the market doesn't learn, and that we're all really stupid, and we're just allowing one little strategy to work over and over. All right. So that would be in support of it. Well, in support of one of the implications in any case. The AMH does in fact state that in the long run, but although the definition of long run across papers is inconclusive, that for longer periods of time the market is in fact efficient. But during short times the risk-return relationship seems to be unstable, and as a result there are these opportunities to profits to be made.
But to correct that, I mean, if the factors change all the time, remember that paper Haugen and Baker 1996?
Yes.
The characteristics approach. Okay, basically they just plug in all the different attributes in a linear model, and then if you plug in, then eventually use some kind of rules that you eliminate the factors that you think are not efficient, I mean, are not relevant in pricing the assets. I mean, the long term.
Yes.
So basically, that's a characteristic approach. Okay. So then, even if these different attributes, the important attributes in explaining the return change all the time, you can't use that as 100% support of AMH. You can only partially support it, because even it change all the time, how do you prove that investors actually learn it over time? So you have to devise a strategy that basically based on the in sample, and then whether it will work in the immediate out sample. And then when you start moving forward, you also change your in-sample learning over time.
Yeah, I see. I
and
understand.
then in looking at if you can just learn it quickly, are you able to apply immediately? Okay, so even the attribute change, the important attribute change all the time. It's not enough to really support the AMH.
Okay.
You also need to know that if investors are able to use certain rules to learn the certain kind of attributes and in selecting the stocks, or in predicting the returns of the stock.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that the genetic algorithm, I mean, there are lots of settings that you can do. There are lots of programs that can run that. But end of the day, I mean, to test AMH, you don't really necessarily need it, because just say that you use it, and also there is no 100% guarantee that it will outperform a linear model. And then the question will always be like, I mean, there are so many linear models being tested, like, you know, all these different things. Why don't you test the linear one? So the problem is going to come to a stage that you think that the genetic algorithm works somehow, but it does not be the linear. So what's the rationale for you to even test that kind of things? You see,
something I have been considering for a while.
And sometimes researchers tend to think that something that's more complicated will work. But then the history has told us that
the market can
things are, I mean, sometimes we actually lack of the ability to generalize. Ability to generalize means that you are able to pick up something that will repeat all the time, or in a very short space of time. Okay, maybe it will fade away in future. Okay, and then the model that always has the best ability to generalize is your linear model.
The market can stay insolvent for longer than we can stay rational.
Yeah. So whatever that you are tasting, I will say that start with a linear model. Okay, try to taste that if the attribute change all the time. If it does change all the time, try to see that if the investors can follow certain kind of strategy to learn the gradual changing, like whatever you show us in Grazilla. Okay, so we learn that there could be something there, so we know that for the immediate next period. Then something else comes up, then we know that we are going to look for the curtains and gorilla. And then if the situation changes,